Hey guys, Pastor Chelsea here, and you're watching The Thursday Show. Thanks for joining me this week. So this past Sunday, we had the honor of having Jim Jordan come and preach with us on Sunday morning. Jim is just an awesome man of God. He is our Michigan Regional Director. So he oversees the missionary churches in the Michigan region. He travels and visits other churches, and he just shares his heart for where God is leading us as a denomination in the days ahead. He preached out of Acts chapter 1, verse 8, which says to go and make disciples of all nations. It got me thinking about this idea of going and preaching the good news. I know we talked about a very similar topic under the Go episode of the Thursday Show a few weeks back, but I felt like we needed to have a follow-up conversation about what it means to evangelize or to share our faith. Now, the word evangelism, interestingly enough, does not appear in the Bible. The word evangelist does, talking about somebody who goes and preaches the gospel. But the idea of sharing our faith, which is what evangelism is everywhere in Scripture. Evangelism means to spread the Christian good news by public preaching or personal witness. And when we talk about the good news or the gospel, we're really talking about the good news about Jesus and what he's done for us and how he's created this opportunity for us to be made right in God's sight and have a relationship with him. Now, I have a confession to make right here and now. Growing up, I did not like evangelism. I know, as a pastor, I'm probably not supposed to confess those kinds of things, but it's true. Growing up, I hated the idea of evangelism, and I felt like a bad Christian admitting it. But now that I look back, I realize I had the idea of evangelism all wrong. You see, I hated it because I saw it as a chore, an obligation, something that I had to do whether I liked it or not. I also didn't like it because I felt like, as an introvert, it wasn't made for me. It was made for the extroverts of the world. I also didn't like it because it felt like cold call marketing. You know, when you have the telemarketer. You know, when you have the telemarketer call you up on the phone and you don't want to talk to them and your goal is to get off the phone as quickly as possible? That was the kind of response I felt like I got whenever I tried to talk to somebody about my faith. I also didn't like it because I felt like it was a category made more for missionaries and camp evangelists, and I didn't like it because I felt like there was a right way and a wrong way to do it, and I was so afraid of doing it the wrong way. But I have good news. That is not what evangelism is meant to be. You see, I finally had the realization that I had it all wrong back in my college days. I took a class on discipleship and evangelism, and it talked about what evangelism is meant to be. It talked about how often we get it wrong, as had I, but it talked about how it's really so simple. It's just showing people how much we love Jesus. Showing people through our example, through our light, and also showing through people through intentional conversations. And it doesn't have to be scary, and there's not a right or a wrong way to do it. After reading that, it started to open me up more to this idea of evangelism and just, bringing people along the journey of what God was doing in my life. But also, after reading another book in adult years called One Way Love, it really showed me how incredible God's grace is. See, in order for us to share our faith with other people, we have to first realize how much we needed God's grace ourselves. If I think I'm doing okay and have cleaned myself up pretty good on my own, then I really don't have any sense of urgency to tell other people about what God has done. But once we come to a place of realizing how desperately we need Jesus every single day, that changes the way that we want to talk about him, and it changes our heart and our passion. So when it comes to evangelism, I think there's two ways that we can share our faith with other people: passive evangelism and purposed evangelism. Passive evangelism is what happens when we naturally rub shoulders with someone. They observe you, your life. They see what you say. They see what you don't say. They see what you do and what you don't do. Just by living your life, it is a huge testimony and example to those that are around you, and in that can lead to great conversations and questions. So here's some examples of what that could look like. For me, I remember I was at a go-kart place one time with friends, and we were standing in line, talking, laughing, I don't remember what about, when we got up to the counter, and the gentleman who was working there turned to us and said, "Are you guys Christians?" We were kind of surprised. We weren't really talking about anything spiritual, and yet somehow he knew. And so we asked him, "Hey, yeah, we are. How did you know that?" And he said, "There's just something about the way you were interacting with each other that I could tell." Simply standing in line and being kind to one another gave witness to that man of our faith. Here's some other ways that you can see passive evangelism at work. People noticing what language you don't use at work. Or going to a restaurant and eating your meal, the waitress notices that you pray together beforehand, so tipping really generously as testimony of the generous God that we serve. Or maybe just paying it forward. Buying somebody's meal in the line at McDonald's or Starbucks just to show that generous kindness and nature of God. Or having a Bible verse taped in your cubicle at work or somewhere that others would see it. It's a simple, passive way for people to observe your faith. Honestly, another big one these days is how you use your social media. Now, I don't mean you have to plaster verses and Christian memes all over your Facebook page, but even just the way that you interact with people, or the times that you choose to hold your tongue rather than engaging in clickbait. Those are all ways that we can passively share our faith and bear testimony to the people that are around us. Now, passive evangelism is super important, but you can't just share your faith passively. There comes a time and a place when you have to have a purposed conversation with those around you. So purposed evangelism is having intentional conversations about God and about the gospel. The key word there is intentional. You're going to have to look for these opportunities, maybe even sometimes plan them out. A couple years ago, I had a family member where I wasn't sure where they were at with the Lord. And I really felt like the Lord was putting it on my heart to just ask them. I was nervous, I was terrified, but I knew that that's what God wanted me to do. So I invited them out to dinner, and during our dinner conversation, I intentionally chose to ask them, "So hey, where are you at with God these days? Do you believe in Him? Do you not? What do you think?" And that led to an amazing conversation about God and faith and opened the door for further conversations to happen in the future. That conversation never would have taken place if I hadn't been intentional and had a purpose to make it happen. So there's going to come a time and place with the friends, neighbors, people around you that you're going to have some intentional conversations. Now, yes, it will take courage, but the amazing thing is you already have relationships with these people. So here's some examples of what that could look like. Building intentional relationships with the people that are at the places that you regularly frequent. Maybe your hairdresser or the waitress at the restaurant that you always go to. Be intentional about going back and seeing the same people so you can build a friendship with them. And then from there, lead to intentional conversations about God and faith. Another huge way to be purposed with sharing your faith is by sharing your testimony, sharing your story of what God has done in your life. You see, when I grew up and I thought I had to remember the Romans Road or have this list of key points to share my faith with, that was okay, but all of those elements could be argued by somebody. But what no one can ever argue with you about is your story of what God has done in your life. You're the ultimate authority on your life, so there's no way somebody is going to be able to dispute what God has done for you. So sharing your story can be a huge way to share the good news of what God is doing. Here's a couple of other ways that you can share your faith in a purposed way. Inviting somebody from work or school to join you at church for a weekend service. Or looking for opportunities to intentionally show God's love to those who are hurting. Or praying with somebody when they bring up a hurt that they have, stopping what you're doing and praying out loud for them. And what's so exciting is that as you do this, as you're intentionally sharing your faith, passively through your life and purposely through your conversations, you never know how God is going to use it and how He could change somebody's life. You might get to be the person that helps them cross that line and start a relationship with Jesus Christ for the very first time. If that happens, don't be nervous. It's not as scary as it might seem like it is. A simple way that I've remembered since my teenager years to remember is to remember my ABCs. So if you have somebody that wants to accept Jesus, that's all you have to remember too. ABC. A, admit that I'm a sinner and that I'm in need of Jesus. B, believe. Believe that Jesus Christ is King, that He came to this earth to rescue me and my sins, and believe that He is your Lord. And then C, confess. Confess out loud with your mouth that you want Jesus in your life and that you want to have a relationship with Him. It's really that simple. Romans 10:9 and 10 says that if you believe with your heart that Jesus is Lord and confess with your mouth, you will be saved. So who is evangelism for? It's for all of us. If you believe in Jesus, you are called to share your faith. But remember the good news. It doesn't have to be scary. It's just coming out of the overflow of what God is doing in you and then rubbing off on the people around you with both passive evangelism and purposed evangelism. I know God is going to use you in mighty ways in the lives of people around you. Now here's a challenge for those of you who are watching today. Tell me in the comments about a time that you shared your faith and how God showed up in awesome ways. I would love to hear your evangelism stories and how God showed up, even if it was in a one-time conversation or if somebody chose to accept Jesus. All of those should be celebrated because we're the church. We're meant to encourage each other and spur each other on. And by sharing those stories in the comments is a great way that we can do that. And hey, if you want to have a deeper conversation about how to accept Jesus Christ, maybe those ABCs were interesting to you and you want to talk with a pastor, I would love to talk with you. Just send me an email to chelsea@cwmc.church and I will reach out and we'll have a great conversation together. Well, church, as we go into all the world, I encourage you to be on the lookout for how you can share your faith with the people that are around you. I'm so blessed by you guys, and I hope you have an amazing Thursday and an amazing week. I'll see you next time.